Hi, with this video I wanted to show you how to use Excel to store images, which is something that was always difficult in previous versions, but there have been some updates which will make it much easier. And for this exercise I'm imagining that I am a Year 7 teacher and I would like to set up some sort of record of butterfly spotting. So I have set up a little butterfly table with all the butterflies that I think it's likely that people will see. We're based in the UK, and I think these are probably the top 10 most popular butterflies in the UK. I've made columns with their common name and their scientific name, and I have imported some images, and this is one of the things I wanted to show you how to work with. I've done nearly all of them already, but I've left a little space at the bottom here for speckled wood so you can see how that's happened. You need to make your columns a decent width and a decent height, so you can just adjust the column widths at the little border at the top here, or you can adjust the row height here. So you need to kind of set them all to be the same width and the same height. And the easiest way to do that, if I select all my rows down the side here, including my speckled wood, let go of my selection and then just adjust the height of one of the rows, all the rows will change at the same time. And the same thing is true of my columns. If I selected both columns and stretch the width of one of those columns, can you see it changes the size of the image? So you need to sort of decide how big an image you're going to want and try to make them all the same size. I'm just going to undo the stuff that I've just done, so I'm back to a sort of sensible size again. But I've left a little space for my last two images for speckled woods, and I'll just show you how I inserted those. When you go to insert pictures, you will get two options now. An option that says place in cell or place over cell. Now, if I wanted one big image, like, I don't know, my image for my invoice, so I had a logo or something like that, I'd probably choose place over cells, because then I can make it go over an area of different cells to make it quite large. But with these ones, I want each image to belong to one specific cell, and there's a really important reason for that, which I'll show you later on. So I'm going to say place in cell, and then you'll get a choice of where is the image coming from. Is it coming from this device? So have you saved it already on your computer? Do you want to go and search the stock images that come with Excel? Or do you want to go and search online for a picture? And actually what I did was these images, because I wanted to make sure they were copyright free images. When you go and look on Wikipedia, there are some what they call common images, which are basically ones that you can use without infringing copyright. So if you wanted to search on Wikipedia, download your images, and then you could choose this option that says this device and go and find the images that you've saved. And I've got one with butterflies. I've decided I needed two images of each butterfly, sometimes because there's a male and a female and there's significant difference in their colouring, and I want the children to be able to spot which one they've seen. And sometimes it's because the top of a butterfly is very colourful and the underside is brown or something, and I wanted to make sure that if their wings are folded up, you could still recognise the butterfly that you've seen. So can you see I've got a speckled wood 1 and speckled wood 2, and I think that's because they're male and female. So I'm going to say speckled wood 1, insert into that space, and then do the same thing again, picture, place in cells, this device, and then speckled wood 2. And then I'm just going to just slightly adjust my column widths a little bit and my row heights a little bit, so that I don't get loads of weird spaces. Actually, I shouldn't have done a double click. Normally when you do a double click, it will size to the height of whatever's in the cell, but what that did actually is it sized to the height of the text, which made my images too small. So I'm just going to leave it like that, I think, and give that a little save. Now the next thing I want to do with this is I want to tell Excel that this is a table, And there's lots of advantages to doing that, but one of which is it makes it really easy to sort. So I'm going to highlight all of this data, and on your home tab there's an option called format as table, and you can choose whatever design you like. And if you had kind of school colours or something like that that you wanted to match it with, there's an option that says new table style, and you can design your own colour scheme. But because I don't really want it to mess with the colours of the butterflies, I'm just going to choose a very plain looking colour scheme that won't affect it very much. And can you see it says, where is the data for your table? It's in range A1 to D16, and just check that that's picked up all of my rows, which it has. Has your table got headers? What it's talking about is that first row along the top. Is that a heading row? Which in my case, it's picked up automatically. So all I've got to do is say OK, and then it's set me up a little table. And there's lots of advantages to having things set up as tables, which we'll see as we go along in the video. Now, it names your tables by just calling them table 1, table 2, table 3, and so on. So if you have a look on a tab at the top called table design, can you see mine's already called it table 2? Now, I'm going to have quite a few tables in my spreadsheet, so probably it's better to give a more sensible name. The name that you give it can be any combination of text or numbers, but it can't have any spaces in it. So I'm just going to call it butterfly list, but just without the space. And then when I press enter, now I'll know which table is which. Now, the other thing I've got is I've automatically copied in the register of names. Now, it depends how you want to do this. If you've got hundreds of people, you potentially obviously might want to have first name and surname in the same column, and you can use a function called concatenate to put them together into one column if that is not how the data presents at the minute. But I'm assuming I've only got one class of children and I know them all by their first names, so I'm just going to use the first name as my drop-down list. And what I might do, no, I'll leave the surnames in there, but we'll just use the first names for our drop-down list. If you had lots of people with the same first name, obviously you could put an initial in there or something. You just need something to make each person unique. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to highlight that list. And I'm going to set up something called a named range. And all you need to do is in this little box up here is give that range a name. Again, you can't have any spaces. So I'm just going to call it first name, but without a space in there. And then I will know to refer to my first name area, if you like. And then I've created my butterfly spotter table. Now, I've thought about all the column headings that I want. I want the name of the student. I want the date that they saw the butterfly. I want the location. So were they at home in their garden or were they in the park or whatever? And maybe some notes about how they saw them or what they were doing. Were they feeding or were they sunbasking or whatever? And then we'll have a little drop-down list that they can choose the name of the butterfly that they saw. And what Excel will do automatically is it will fill in the scientific name, it will fill in the images, and then all the student has to enter is how many they saw. So that's the purpose really of this video, is to show you how to do those drop-down lists and show you how to do the lookups that will bring all the information across, including the images, which is the new thing that you didn't used to be able to do. So first of all, I'm going to create a drop-down list on the name column. So I'm going to click onto the A of column A, and that selects the whole column. And bear in mind, an Excel spreadsheet's more than about 1 million rows long. So it doesn't really matter how big this table gets or how many times a child enters data, because you might have 20 different entries from the same child. The table could get pretty big, but it's not going to run out of space. And then what I'm going to do is on the data tab, there's a little button over here which has got a little green tick and a red no entry sign on it, and it's called data validation. And it basically controls how people can enter data into a cell. So you could say, well, you can only enter numbers in this column, or you can only enter dates in this column or whatever, which stops people putting in inappropriate data, if you like. But in this case, we would like to be able to pick from a list so that they don't type their name slightly differently. If they've got multiple entries and one time they put Fred and another time they put Freddie, then when you try to do your totals, they won't add up correctly. So we're going to make them pick it from a list. Now, if you remembered what we'd called that first name list, you could just type equals and first name or whatever we called it. But if you get to this point and you can't remember, just press the F3 key, or if you've got a different laptop from me, it'll be function and F3. And this comes up with a list of all the named ranges that you've set up. And do you remember we set up one called first name? And that's the one that I want. Now, I don't think on a drop-down list you really need an input message. It might be fairly obvious, but what that is when someone hovers over the cell, you can give them a set of instructions. So because it's for children, we'll give them a set of instructions. So we'll say the title is your name, and the input message is please choose your name from the list. Now, this is the important one. It's the one called error alert. And what this is what happens if they type something that isn't in that named range called first name, or whatever we called it. So if they spell their name differently, or if there's a child that you haven't thought of, or maybe the teacher wants to do the spotter and you hadn't remembered to put them on the list, at the moment, it won't allow that to happen because it's set to an option called stop. So if you want to allow them to type stuff in themselves, but you want some sort of message to pop up when that happens, you can use the option called warning or the option called information. Because I want to calculate on each student, I'm going to leave it set to stop, actually, so they can't misspell a name or what have you. But I wouldn't leave the error message area blank because it comes up with this sort of generic Microsoft error message, which says something like the user has entered data against the validation message or something, which nobody is going to understand, let alone year sevens. So what we're going to do is put a kind of message in there, and I'll say, I don't know, name, error, and I'm going to say, please choose cancel and pick your name from the list. And you'll see what I'm talking about in a second. If I say OK to that, anywhere where you hover over this column, as soon as you click on it, you get that little message coming up saying, please choose your name from the list. And as your student tries to choose their name from the list, it works swimmingly. But let's say, I don't know, who should we pick on? I'm going to say, I don't know, Charlie or something. You've called him Charlie, but he tries to type in Charles. You get that error message that was on that stop page. And the trouble is that if you retry, which is the common thing that you'd want to do, as soon as you click on the drop-down list, it gets you in a circle and brings back the error message again. So that's why I've specifically said, please choose cancel, because otherwise I think you just end up going around in circles, and then you can choose the person you want from the list. Now, that's okay for the names. Now we're going to do the dates. Now, you could leave the dates free to do whatever you like, but there's so many different ways of entering dates that sometimes Excel recognises them as a date and sometimes it doesn't. And I think it's really important to make sure that people enter the dates correctly. Otherwise, when you start to do things like pivot tables and clever advanced stuff in Excel, you can't do it because Excel doesn't recognise it as a date. So what we're going to do is we're going to restrict the way that they enter dates into this column. So I'm going to click onto the B, or column B. I'm going to go back to that data validation button on my data tab, back to the settings tab, and this time we're going to specify it's a date. And actually, I think it's quite sensible to put a date range in so that somebody doesn't accidentally type 1984 when they meant to put 2084 or something, because Excel will kind of guess. If you just put the 2 digits for the year, it guesses which century you're talking about, if you see what I mean. So I know this is going to have been this year, let's say. So I'm going to say it's between the 1st of the 1st, 2026, and the 31st of the 12th, 2026. And then I know that I'm capturing only this year's data and they're not putting 1926 by mistake. Now, the input message is going to have to be a bit clearer this time because entering dates has to be done in a specific way. So I'm going to say this is the date that the butterfly was spotted. And I'm going to say, please enter date like this. DD/MM/YYYY. So the 1st of Jan 2026 would be 01/01/2026. Hopefully that's clear enough. And then the same thing applies with the error alert. I'm going to let it set to stop potentially so that they can't put in some weird date. And I'm going to say, please check your date and say, please enter a date in 2026 in the format DD/MM/YYYY, i.e. 01/01/2026. And hopefully that's clear enough. And then as you click onto the cell, you don't get a drop down this time, but you do get your little input message. And then as you put in your date, let's say that was the 1st of January 26, so that's fine. Oh, except it's not fine because I didn't spell 26 properly. Hold on, let me try that again. That's better. Now let's try to put in the 1st of the 1st, 2025. And that's when I'm going to get my error message. And this time you can retry because you can go in and correct just that last little bit. And then if I put in the 1st of December, that works swimmingly. But if I try to put in the 1st of the 1st, 2027, that's outside my range as well. So it won't let me. And I'm just going to cancel that one. Now the location, I'm going to leave that a free text field so they can put in whatever they like. Once you've got some data back, you might want to look at that and restrict that to specific entries and say, was it in your garden or was it in the park or whatever? But until we know where they're likely to spot them, we'll just let them put in whatever they like. So that was in the garden, that was in the park, and that was in the playground or something. And any notes that they want to put in themselves, again, I'm going to leave that as a free text field. Now, the common name, this needs to come from that list of butterflies that we set up earlier. So if I go back to my butterfly table, I want it from this column here. So I'm going to select all of these items and I'm just going to name it with my little named range. And I'm going to call it common name. Don't forget to press enter and don't forget you can't have a space. And then again, I'm going to select the whole of my column, so it doesn't matter how big my spreadsheet gets. The data validation will work all the way down. And then I'm going to say, what do I want? I want a list. The source of my list, if I press F3, is just called common name. Well, actually, I've got two. Don't think it matters which one I choose. The input message, you could put an input message if you want to. So I could say, I don't know, type of butterfly. And I'm going to say, please choose butterfly that you saw. And the error alert, well, this time what we might do is we've thought of the top 10 butterflies that they've seen, but what if they've seen something we didn't think of? If we leave it set to stop, they won't be able to enter it at all. So what we'll do is I'm just going to change it to information, which is a much more polite error message anyway, and it allows them to overwrite the list that I've set up. So I'm going to say not in list, and I'm going to say your butterfly was not in the list. And what that means is they'll be able to do it, but they just won't get all this information, the scientific name and the images and so on, because I haven't thought of it yet. But obviously I could go and add those in later. And then I can say, oh, he saw brimstone, he saw common blue, and he saw I don't know what she will have, orange tips, lovely. Now, this is the clever bit, is that we now want it to go and find from those common names what's the scientific name for each one, because we can't expect them to know that. So we're going to use something called XLOOKUP. Now, if you are familiar with lookups and have done lookup formulas before, you likely would have used something called VLOOKUP, and the V was for vertical because your data had to be in columns. And there was also something called HLOOKUP, which was less common but was a horizontal lookup. So you looked across rows, basically. But now we have something called XLOOKUP. It can do either, which is much more helpful. And there's lots of extra functionality that it's got as well. Now, I think the easiest place to find it is make sure you know where you want your formula to go. So in my case, it's in the scientific name. And then underneath the formulas tab, there's a whole section about lookup and reference, which has got XLOOKUP and VLOOKUP and all the rest of it in there. And I'm going to pick XLOOKUP. And I like doing it this way rather than typing because it gives you lots of help as you go along. Can you see it comes up with this function arguments box, which is showing you what you need to fill in, basically. And if the text here is bold, it means that it's a mandatory field. You have to complete all those 3 fields, but there are some additional fields underneath that. If I scroll down, there's a few more actually, which are useful if you want them, but if you leave them blank, it doesn't matter. So for the minute, what we're going to say is the lookup value is the name of the butterfly, because that was what we know. The lookup array is where would I find the word brimstone, and it's in my butterfly table in the column called common name. And if I just click onto the column heading there, can you see it's going butterfly table, column A, basically. And the return array is in that same table, where is the data that I want? And because I want the scientific name, I'm going to choose column B. And there is an option called if not found. So if it doesn't find a match on brimstone, what do you want it to do? I'm just going to put in inverted commas, not in list. So you know that guy that might choose a butterfly that I haven't thought of yet? Instead of it leaving the cell empty or coming up with an error message, it will just say not in list, and you know those are the ones that you need to add in later. And then it's come up automatically with my brimstone. And if I copy that down, it's done the same for all of them. And effectively, I can do exactly the same job for image 1 and image 2. So I'm going to go back to my lookup and reference, find my XLOOKUP. What am I looking up? Common name. Where is it? It's in column A. But this time, my return array is going to be column C because I want image 1. And I might just leave that cell blank. So I'm just going to put an inverted commas in with nothing in between. So that goes, if not found, it just leaves the cell empty because we already know that if it'll say not found on the scientific name. And then if I copy that down, it's found all my images. Now, the problem with the images is it looks at the height of the row to determine how big to make the image. So what we're going to do is maybe say how many we think we might need. Let's say we think we need 60 rows or something. I'm going to select my 60 rows and just stretch them to whatever height I think I want for the images. Maybe I'll be a bit more generous and make them a bit bigger than that. And then I can just make the column width fit the size of those images. And then I'm going to do exactly the same thing for image 2. Lookup and reference. XLOOKUP. What am I looking up? I'm looking up the common name. Where am I looking? In the common name column. What do I want to see? I want image 2 this time. And it should size correctly because now it knows how big the row is going to be. And when I copy that down, it's filled in all my second images as well. And I'll just make that column a sensible width. And then what we want them to do is see how many did they see of that species. And let's say they say, I saw 3, I saw 2, and I saw 4 or something. Now I'm just going to do a couple of little things to fix the alignment, because when you make the rows really deep, you get this slightly weird alignment of the text. If it's text, it sits in the bottom left-hand corner of the cell. Can you see if it's a date or a number, it sits in the bottom right-hand corner of the cell, which I don't really like. And because we've got to have such deep rows because of the size of the images, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make them centered and middle, which is these two, so that everything's in the middle of the cell. And I'm going to go for a bit of a more generous font size, I think. Oh, the only trouble with that is that it's going to make my scientific name column a bit narrow. I'll make that a bit wider. Actually, I'll be quite generous because some of the scientific names are quite long. There we go. Now, the other thing I want to do is I want to set up, we set up this butterfly table as a table. I'm going to do the same thing with my spotter table. So I'm just going to select those ones that I've done already. And I'm going to choose format as table. And maybe I'll choose a slightly different colour scheme this time, just so it's really obvious. And what that means is when I add an extra person on the bottom, let's pick on Jack, I type in a date that they saw, probably not in February, it's really, really cold, wasn't it? And they saw it in the park. And what type of butterfly did they see? They saw a holly blue, and they saw 3, or so on. And can you see, as you type a new row, it brings all the information down. You didn't have to copy any formula or anything like that. The formatting stays the same. If you've chosen a design that you don't like, it's also really easy to change the design. If I go back to the table design tab, all the colour schemes and everything are here. So you can go through and just hover over each one until you find you one that you like the look of, and then it updates the whole table at once, so it makes formatting much more easy. Now, what I'm going to do on the next video is I'm going to show you, if you've gathered all this information together, let's say you've got a few hundred records now of all the spots that everyone's done, then you can pull all the data together to make reports, so you can see which butterfly was the most common, which child saw the most butterflies, was it more common to find it in the park or in the garden or in your playground or whatever. And then we can do some really beautiful charts. So come back to the next video and I'll show you how to make all this data into charts.